Hi, everybody. I'm Natalie Nia Falk. I use they, them, and she, her pronouns. And I am elated to be able to speak at this Black Lives Matter rally here in New Orleans with folks who have grown up with, who have saw me become radicalized, and with folks who have loved on me deeply. And to be in deep community with my friends and comrades feels really amazing. Did you know that the average life expectancy of a Black trans woman is 35? Now, imagine if you only had 35 years to live your whole life. What kind of life would you want to lead? What could you do? As if this was medieval times. 35. Now, while there's some argument that this isn't actually factual, imagine hearing the statistic over and over again until it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. Black trans women, Black cisgender women, gender nonconforming folks face increased and disproportionate systemic violence, interpersonal violence, and internalized violence. And yet, whenever we talk about Black Lives Matter, when we talk about the police brutality, when we talk about systemic violence, we're mostly just talking about Black men. And our voices are erased from the conversation. At every protest, you can hear the names George Floyd, you hear the names Alton Sterling, you hear Philando Castile, you hear Mike Brown, you hear Tamir Rice. But not once have you heard the name Breonna Taylor, Nina Pop, Tony McDade, Shaky Peterson. Yes, it is up to us to include and to center these voices. And I'm going to let you know why we must center and how we can center Black, trans, gender nonconforming, and cisgender women's voices in this movement. They are at increased violence. As I just shared with you, we see that they face systemic violence, we face interpersonal violence, and we face intercommunal violence as well, right? So not only are we getting it from the institutions and the systems that try to harm Black folks, we also get it within the community that we are existing within. Intimate partner violence, hate violence are forced upon Black, trans, and gender nonconforming folks. And so it becomes that we only have each other because Black cisgender folks and Black men are harming us and killing us at disproportionate rates. Systems are killing us at disproportionate rates. We are at increased violence everywhere that we turn. And yet we're the least protected. We have been at the forefront of the movements and at the community since before colonization, since before whiteness came into our communities. In communities post-colonization, we were the shamans, the healers, the magic workers. We were the folks who provided community care, who cooked and who watched the kids, who had love-centered movements. And whenever we're removed from our communities, whenever we're harmfully killed, what happened to the movements? The movements become less love-centered. The movements lose the healing component. The movements lose magic and shamanistic energy that's being brought to the forefront. Our movements become about anger and about rigor as opposed to being about holistic humans. We also lose the understanding that to be trans is to be inherently radically imaginative. To say fuck the gender binary and fuck gender construct is to be radically imaginative. Things that we all need in this upcoming time where we're asking for defunding of the police, where we're asking for increased visibility for Black and brown issues. We have to be radically imaginative, and that is inherent in being a trans and gender nonconforming person. We lose that essence of magic and radical imagination. We lose holistic movements that aren't just centered on goals, but are also centering on keeping the wellness and wholeness of our people at the forefront. And we lose our lovers, our culture bearers, the folks who provide and move with the community care and love. We have always been at the forefronts of movements, but have been erased. And it is now time for us to continue to dig deeper and to support and lift up these voices. We know that when the most directly impacted person is free, it leaves so much more room for everyone else to be free around them. And so by that logic, a Black, trans, incarcerated person should have freedom before any of us should have freedom. And once they're more liberated, we know that everyone else will be more liberated. If a Black, trans, formerly incarcerated person has access to jobs, housing, and education, we can assure ourselves that a cisgender woman will have access to jobs, housing, and education. And we know if that's true, then Black men will have jobs, housing, and education. Strategically, it makes sense. Energetically, it makes sense to center our folks. There is no Black liberation without trans liberation. All Black lives must be liberated for liberation to be a thing. Now, I know you're asking, how do we do that? Where do we start? It's easy. First thing you do is the political education that you have to do. Watch the speeches, read the literature, have the conversations that inform you about the movements and the leadership of Black trans folks, because they exist. They've been there. It's plentiful. There's an expansive amount of leadership in this city here of Black trans leaders. There's an expansive amount of leadership historically from Black trans folks. And so read the literature, have the conversations that you need to have. Our movements include immigration rights movements. Our movements include healthcare movements. Our movements include liberation on all fronts. We're there and we've been there. So be in solidarity, do the political education, then be in solidarity with us. Invite us to the planning tables, weave our interconnected oppressions together to create broad systemic change. Have us there. Have us speak at the rally, but not just at the rally, not just this one moment. Have us part of the long-term strategy for liberation. When you say defund the police, what are we funding with that money? Are we investing in Black trans housing, Black trans education, trans healthcare? Not only are we asking to defund, we're asking to invest and to build these systems. Because we know that whenever we have systems that hold us up, that are community-led, the systems that are in place to take us down and to harm us cannot sustain themselves. It just doesn't work that way. The last thing we can do is believe us when we say who we are and believe us when we say we have existed. Write us in history, write us into the truth that we already are, and dream alongside us. Build this world that we want together. Just in the last 2 weeks, there have been 8 Black trans women who have been killed. 2 of them were in this very state. The time is now, and we're dying, we're being targeted, and we're still doing the work of showing up for these movements. And it's the time for y'all to show up for us. How are you showing up for us and not being complicit in systems that are killing us? Silence is violence. We have been in solidarity with you from the very first march, from the very first meeting. Won't you be in solidarity with us? Together we can have beautiful movements that maximize our community's political power and is centered in holistic beings that have self-determination and the ability to see each other across difference. That is why we have to center Black trans women, Black gender non-conforming folks, and Black women in our movements. All Black lives matter. Black trans lives matter. Thank you.